Chapter 19. Page 222. December 1927. Stocks had been declining for several weeks. This month stocks declined rapidly and Robert was heavily short. Wheat and corn advanced. Robert had been on the right side for several months. Just before Christmas, he figured that he would cover his short stocks and wait for a rally which he expected would come in January or February. He now had profits which gave him working capital of over $500,000, allowing for all the money that he had spent. So he decided to put more time in working on his invention, as he was now in position to spend money enough to develop his first airplane. He kept in touch every few days with the detective agency, but no word had been received from Marie. Her parents had about given up hope that Marie was alive. Robert wrote them a very encouraging letter because he wanted to cheer them up at Christmas time. Told them that he believed Marie was alive, and that he had faith in God, and wanted them to have faith and continue to pray for Marie's return. Informed them of his great financial success, and told them that he had continued to keep Marie's account separate, and had traded very conservatively for her, and that she now had over $40,000, which he intended to try to increase and have as a great surprise for her. Robert sent beautiful Christmas gifts to them in memory of Marie. A few days before Christmas there was a big decline in the stock market. All kinds of unfavorable rumors were afloat. Business conditions were bad. War clouds were gathering thick in Europe. Newspapers talked of the uncertainties in the new year due to the coming presidential election. The public had lost confidence and were selling stocks. Robert decided that this was the time to cash in, so he covered a big line of shorts in Major Motors, Central Steel and others. This was a great Christmas for him, financially. From his beginning with 200 bales of cotton in January 1927, with a capital of $1,000 and $10,000 which Mr. Kenniworth gave him later. Through his successful pyramiding he had made over $500,000. He was overjoyed with his success because it would help him now to complete his airplane and other inventions. His mind turned back to Christmas 1926, when he had bought Marie a beautiful ring with the money he had saved. At that time he little realized that so much could happen in one short year. He thought of all he could do for Marie this year if he only knew where she was. Decided that he would buy some beautiful presents for her anyway and keep them until she returned to show her that he was thinking of her on Christmas. He bought a beautiful diamond ring and a bracelet set with sapphires and diamonds. When the jeweler delivered them, Robert looked them over and thought of all Marie's beauty and purity. His faith in her was still supreme. He was very sad and wept bitterly because he felt more keenly than ever the need for her. He wanted her to be with him to share his financial success. His heart turned to his next dearest friend. His mother. He decided to try to make it the happiest Christmas of her life and bought her every kind of a present that he thought would make her happy and comfortable, and sent her a check for $5,000 to do with just as she pleased and buy anything she wanted. Begged her to come to New York to see him soon after the new year, as he wanted her to see the sights of the city, and thought the trip would be good for her health. In the early part of 1928, Robert calculated that war was inevitable between England and Russia. He figured that the war would start not later than the summer, and that many nations would be involved and that later an attack on the United States would come. His first airplane was now completed. A small one according to the plan laid down by Ezekiel in the Bible. The plane had 4 wings and could fly on either one of its 4 sides. It had a new motor with 12 cylinders, and could be operated either with gas, electricity or compressed air. He had constructed a wheel within a wheel, so that he could lower his plane and land anywhere he chose and could rise straight up. One motor had a propeller in the center of the plane to lift it up, while the other motor started its direct motion. He could drive his plane backwards or forwards. It was a great success, and the boy wizard of Wall Street was now hailed as a new Lindbergh of the air. There was an extra motor built with a collapsible propeller so that he could shift it from the center of the airplane to the tail, enabling it to go backward or forward as he willed. The wings were so arranged that they could either remain stationary, or be set in motion up or down by motor. This was a new and valuable feature in the construction of airplanes. Robert's next invention was to build a silent motor, or a muffler, which would prevent any sound. He knew that this would be very useful in war. After he had completed this invention, tested it and proved it a success. He offered it to the United States government, but after the Army officers, who knew very little about this new invention, had looked it over, they refused it. Robert then sailed away in his new plane which he had named, the Sainte Marie. He visited England, France, Germany, and in the spring of 1928 made the longest successful flight to Japan, where he was received with great honor. Japan was very much interested in his new plane and in his muffler. The Japanese government quickly closed a deal and bought his invention for a large sum of money. Robert felt that probably one day this invention would be used against his own country in time of war, but knew that the United States would have to learn a lesson, that too often in the past, American inventions had been sold to foreign countries because his own government would not buy them. While in Japan, Robert was entertained and introduced to many beautiful titled ladies and prominent men. But he remained loyal to Marie, for his great success had not turned his head. He was still searching for Marie, always hoping to find her. He returned to New York in the summer of 1928. And was now reputed as being worth more than $1 million, after making more successful deals in stocks, cotton and wheat. He had followed the advice of old Henry Watson, and had never scattered over 2 or 3 markets at the same time. When he had a deal on in cotton or wheat, he stuck to that until he closed the transaction. When he went into a stock campaign, he stayed out of the commodity markets. He was meeting with success in every direction. But his longing for Marie continued, and the vision of her beautiful face continued to haunt him. In May 1928, Walter received a radiogram from Robert, saying that he was leaving Japan the latter part of the month, and was going to sail the St. Marie back to New York. Walter and Miss Edna Quinton, the secretary, had followed the newspaper reports of the great reception tendered Robert by the officials of the Japanese government, and the report of the large amount of money they had paid for his noiseless patent for airplanes. Walter was going to graduate in June. So he wrote his father and informed him that Robert was returning to New York soon with great honors, and he thought it appropriate to have a big celebration for him when he arrived, as his father was coming to New York anyway for the graduation exercises. He suggested that he be there to greet Robert on his triumphant return. Mr. Kenniworth, who was a member of the Chamber of Commerce of Texarkana and one of the leading citizens, called a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce, informed them of the phenomenal success of Robert Gordon, who had left Texarkana 1 year previous an unknown boy, and who was now the most talked of young man in the world. He had made more than $1 million following his own discovery of how to use the laws laid down in the Bible for foretelling the future course of cotton, grain and stocks. Had built the most marvelous airplane of the age. Invented a muffler to make an airplane noiseless. Had driven his own plane, the St. Marie, to Japan, where he had been received with great honors, and the Japanese government had bought his invention for making airplanes silent. Mr. Kenniworth proposed that the leading citizens of Texarkana go to New York to honor their favorite son on his return. When he had finished talking, there was lasting applause and hurrahs for Robert Gordon. Colonel Stanton was in the audience. He arose and said that he heartily endorsed the proposal and would donate $10,000 to the expense fund. That they should go to New York in a special train to greet the greatest young man of the age, who was born on a farm near Texarkana. Everyone was in favor of it, and the wealthy men all followed Mr. Stanton in offering large sums of money in order to make the reception a success. When the meeting was over, J.H. Kenniworth drove out to the country home of Amelia Gordon, Robert's mother, told her of her boy's success and of the plans to meet him in New York and give him a great reception, inviting her to go on the special train as a guest of honor. She thankfully accepted. On June 9, Robert Gordon's 22nd birthday, the great reception took place. The special train bearing the leading citizens of Texarkana arrived. Robert had landed at the new airport on Governor's Island without any mishap to his plane. The St. Marie had performed perfectly, making the trip from Japan at an average speed of over 300 miles per hour. Robert received the surprise of his life when he saw his mother, and rushed to her, and after greeting her affectionately, turned to shake hands with Mr. Kenniworth and Walter. And seeing Mr. and Mrs. Stanton there, was overjoyed, and thought sure that Marie had been found. He rushed to greet her parents, and his first words were, "Where is Marie?" With tears in their eyes, they informed him that not a word had been received in regard to her. They proceeded immediately to the Commodore Hotel, where the reception committee and the entire delegation from Texarkana and arranged for a dinner and celebration. Robert was happy to see all the prominent businessmen from Texarkana there to greet him. Mr. Kenniworth made the address, told Robert how proud Texarkana was of him, said that this was the age of the young man and that Robert had demonstrated that he was the greatest young man of his day. Robert was overwhelmed at this great reception. He thanked his friends, thanked Mr. Kenniworth, personally, and above all for bringing his dear old mother to see him. Said it was the happiest moment of his life. And that his one regret was that Marie was not there, but that he still had hope of finding her. When the reception was over and Robert had a few moments alone with his dear old mother, she said, "My son, do you remember the dream you had when you were a little boy, which you told me about? That you were riding a large bird with white wings across the ocean, and how the foreign countries received you with great honor. My boy, when you landed today, I thought about that dream and how it had been fulfilled. I hope that all of your other dreams and ambitions will be realized and that you will be rewarded with Marie's love, because you have been faithful and loyal to her." Robert said, "Mother, I do remember the dream quite well. And when I was in Japan and they gave me such great receptions and honored me, I thought of the dream, and I thought of you, and how you had taught me how to read the Bible. And I thought of Marie and how I loved her, and felt that I would gladly give all of the honors just to be with you and Marie alone, because your love and Marie's love mean more to me than everything else that the world can give." Walter Kenniworth was graduated from Columbia College in June and prepared to work with Robert in the office. Edna Quinton had proved to be a faithful employee and a valuable aide to Robert. She had taken care of his business and looked after his financial transactions while he was away. Robert soon went to work on a new invention, and perfected a machine to read the minds of people a short distance away, and also a machine which he named the Telltalk. This machine was made on the principle of the radio. By raising and lowering it at certain angles, it would record all the conferences in the different buildings in Wall Street. Robert also used this machine to get reports on all the conferences of the big manipulators. He knew that manipulators in Wall Street suspected that in some way he understood their plans, as he was making money too fast, and they were conspiring to find a way to get him wrong on the market and break him. They changed their plans often, but found that each time Robert was on the right side of the market. Even his friend Walter knew nothing about Robert's latest invention. He kept it in a secret room, and no one had ever seen it but himself. It was a very delicate little machine with indicators like a compass, delicately balanced and operated by electricity. His success was causing great excitement, and schemers wanted to get his secret. They knew that Edna Quinton had been in his office ever since he was in New York. She was invited to a dinner at the Biltmore, where she was offered a large sum of money if she would reveal the secrets of how Robert Gordon so successfully operated in the market. She told them frankly that she knew nothing about how he did it, but if she did know, no amount of money would induce her to turn traitor to her employer. Edna made up her mind that when she reached the office the following morning, she would tell Mr. Gordon just what had happened. Upon reaching the office unusually early, she found Mr. Gordon there. He seemed unusually happy, and she thought that he must have news of Marie. Before she had time to tell him what had happened the night before, he called her into his secret office, the room that she had never seen before. There she saw all kinds of strange instruments which she knew must be some of his new inventions. He took her to a little machine in the corner of the room and showed her some peculiar lines that the machine had recorded on the paper the night before. He told her that his machine received the impressions of people's minds and recorded their thoughts, especially when they were greatly excited or interested in any matter. He read to her from the record on the machine in substance exactly what had been said to her the night before. Then he turned to the Bible and showed her where it said, "Everything that is concealed will be revealed, and everything that is covered will be uncovered." Edna was more excited than she had ever been in her life. She knew that the machine had revealed the truth. Then said to Mr. Gordon that she had intended to tell him that morning just what had happened, and hoped that he would believe that she was loyal to him and had refused to accept a bribe. He then showed her another record on the machine, like a phonograph record, which would record people's thoughts, and told her that it indicated just what she had been thinking about. The machine had read her mind and recorded her thoughts. He assured her that he did believe her and trust her. Edna was moved to tears at this great confidence. She knew that never before had she been permitted to see this secret room, and while she knew of Robert's great love for Marie, she felt that this confidence he had placed in her was more than a matter of business confidence, and that he had some love for her. She had always admired him but had never thought of loving him. Now she knew that she did love him. A few days later Edna had a talk with Walter, because she had known him before Robert came to New York, and it was through his influence she had secured the position. She told him what had happened and confided in him her love for Robert. He was happy to know this and hoped that Robert would fall in love with her, as he believed it would be best for him. Walter said, "I am not an expert judge of how emotions work in men and women, but the way for you to find out how Robert feels toward you is to watch his actions. Make notes of how often he speaks of Marie, of the letters he writes trying to find her. Continue to be as nice and kind toward him as you have always been. If in a few months his interest in the search for Marie wanes, and he ceases to talk about her, it will be a sure sign that his mind and heart is turning toward you." Soon after Walter graduated, Robert called Miss Quinton into his secret office one morning and told her he was going to form a new firm under the name of Gordon, Kenniworth and Quinton. And that Edna was to have an interest in the firm, as reward for her faithful service. She was to help with the work on the secret discoveries. Edna was overjoyed at this and her emotions got the best of her judgment. She flung her arms around Robert's neck, kissed him, told him he was the most wonderful man in the world and that she loved him. He drew himself quickly away from her, sat down in a chair and stared out the window for several minutes before he spoke. Then he turned toward Miss Quinton, faced her with a firm but kind face, told her that she had made a mistake in his actions, that he was rewarding her for faithfulness and that there was no sentiment in the matter, that he did not love her, that he was loyal to his long-lost Marie and would never love anyone else. Edna hardly knew what to say. She begged his forgiveness and tendered her resignation. He told her that he would refuse to accept it, that they would go right on and work together just the same as in the past, if she felt that she could and wanted to. She assured him that she wanted to remain as long as he wanted her, and that in the future she would always control her emotions. Walter Kenniworth had completed a special course in chemistry at college and was now prepared for work in the new firm. His father had been following Robert in the market during the past year and had made a large amount of money. He presented Walter with $100,000, part of the profits which he had made out of the market, with the understanding that the money was to be used in helping to further Robert's inventions. In the fall of 1928, Robert and Walter completed an invention of sun mirrors, whereby they were able to collect the rays from the sun and produce heat powerful enough to melt down skyscrapers in a few minutes. With these mirrors and the aid of electricity, they discovered a powerful light ray. Robert knew that this was going to be of great value in the coming war. They named this machine the Demon of Death. Miss Quinton had been very much interested in this machine, during the course of construction, and she named it Spitfire because it could send forth such powerful sparks of fire, destroying instantly any metal that it touched. They held a conference and agreed that this new discovery must be kept secret and should never be used except in the defense of the United States in time of war and only then if our country was in dire peril and unable to cope with the enemy. There was one secret connected with the machine that only Robert knew. They intended to start to build a giant airship in a short time equipped with the Demon of Death. They figured it would send a powerful death ray 3,000 to 5,000 miles through space, destroying everything within a radius of 700 miles. Work was started on the new machine with all secrecy. It had already been christened Marie the Angel of Mercy. Robert and Walter were making money rapidly in the cotton market. The war clouds were gathering, and Europe was buying cotton. It had had a big advance and they were playing the fast moves up and down, both on the buying and selling sides. There is an old saying that intimacy breeds contempt, but it did not prove so with Walter Kenniworth and Edna Quinton. One beautiful morning in early September 1928, Robert Gordon stepped into the laboratory and found Edna in the arms of Walter. He made a hasty exit, but Walter and Edna knew that they had been caught. Robert was very happy at this discovery because he knew that it was just the thing Walter needed to stimulate his ambitions and give him something to work for. He realized what a wonderful woman Miss Quinton was, and that she too needed inspiration that love alone could give. That evening he invited Walter to dinner with him and when they were alone said, "Well, Walter, the love bug has got you at last." Walter was bashful at first and didn't want to talk much about it. Then he admitted that it had come on very suddenly when he and Edna had realized that they were both in love with each other. Robert told him that it was inevitable and that now was the time it should start and that it would be better for both of them. They were business partners and it would make them more happy and successful in their work. Walter asked him if he still had hopes of finding Marie. Robert told him that he did. That he would never give up the search. Everything moved along smoothly after this. Walter and Edna were happy in their work, and the fall of 1928 rewarded them with a new and wonderful discovery. They had been able to perfect a machine which would reflect light in such a way as to make an airplane invisible, and this, together with Robert's noiseless invention, solved the problem. He knew now that in time of war, the plane could be used to sneak upon the enemy and that they would be unable to see or hear it. After holding a conference, they decided that this invention, as well as the Demon of Death, should not be patented or offered for sale to any government, that they would test it out and keep it a secret. Here Robert's great generosity showed itself again when he decided that this invention should be used in time of greatest need for the benefit of the United States. Walter said, "Robert, love indeed does make a great man, makes him unselfish, causes him to think of his country, of his mother, his sweetheart and everything else before himself. No wonder you are making a success and always will, because you are doing right." The completion of the great machine, the Demon of Death, which Robert had worked on untiringly day and night, was a great triumph for him, but his wonderful energy had been exhausted. Walter had noticed before the machine was completed that Robert looked tired and worn. His mind lacked its old-time quickness and he feared for his health. Robert began to reach the office late and ceased to take an interest in his work. He was moody and despondent. Thanksgiving Day, Walter and Edna arranged a big dinner and invited Robert. He appeared very much worn and ate very little dinner. Both Walter and Edna noticed that he was less talkative than ever before. About an hour after dinner was over, Robert fell in a faint. A doctor was called immediately and after making a careful examination pronounced it a case of nervous breakdown. Said there must be something preying on his mind or that he had been under a long strain. Walter explained the disappearance of Marie and how Robert had worried over the love affair. His long, strenuous campaigns in the stock and commodity markets and his work upon his inventions. That up to a few months previous Robert had been able to work almost day and night without showing any fatigue. But that in recent weeks he had noticed a great change in him. After the doctor had heard the story of the love affair and Marie's disappearance, he was sure that a long and needed rest was necessary to restore Robert to his normal health. He ordered him to remain absolutely quiet and not attempt to look after any of the details of his business. A few days later Walter persuaded Robert to go to Atlantic City. Which he did, and after remaining there and resting a couple of weeks, he returned apparently well and showed his old-time strength and vigor. Was anxious to get back to work and look after his speculative deals in the market.